Hi everyone, welcome to another G News update. Well, today we're down at Surfdale Beach, and this is a beach where in the old days the amphibian aeroplanes used to come in here and land. As you can see, it's quite shallow. We're kind of like about half tide. The tide is quite low. But the amphibians would come in here and land at this beach, and my grandmother would come out and meet us as we got off the plane, as we came over here, often for summer holidays, sometimes winter holidays. And Surfdale is where I had been living with Vicky for the past 4 years since the pandemic began. But now we've moved house because we got chucked out, because we're renters, remember. And at any time, if you're not a homeowner, you can actually be turfed out because someone wants to sell their house. Anyway, today let's go for a walk around the Esplanade. And for those of you who've never heard of the Esplanade is one of the oldest little old roads that remains unsealed around the edge of Waiheke Island. And in recent times we had a big slip on the main road, and the Esplanade became the only way in which people could get a car from, say, the ferry where the wharf comes in, over to other parts of the island. So there'd been discussion here locally about making the Esplanade just for people to walk along and not for cars anymore. But once that slip happened, which was probably a climate-related slip with increasing weather events happening in New Zealand, the thinking about it all changed. So here we go. We're walking down the beginnings of the Esplanade on Waiheke Island. Now, what was in the news today? Well, many of you probably saw Christopher Luxon appear on the breakfast show on TVNZ and be interviewed by Jenny May Clarkson. And what was that about? Well, one of the main issues that was up for discussion were questions about things that the government had been saying about nurses, and the fact that they're commencing some industrial action today and they're going on strike. Not only was there conversation about the fairness of the comments that had been made about how nurses need to get back to the negotiating table, but there was also discussion about teachers. And teachers, the government had said many were earning something like $147,000, but it turned out that really only about 30 deputies, school deputies, deputy principals, were on that kind of money anywhere in New Zealand. So once again, Christopher Luxon's government had been misrepresenting the situation. This reminded me of the $250 tax per fortnight that you can get if you have 2 kids that was sold to us before the election, but then not one single person actually got that tax relief. And so it was just more, fooling the public, the sophistry, I suppose, and the deception and the deceit of the Christopher Luxon government as it tries to diddle people out of fair pay. So the argument from Christopher Luxon this morning went along the lines of, you teachers, you don't care about students like the government does, so you're not, you're being led around by these unions, and the unions don't care. They don't care like we, the government, care. And see all those potholes there? Those potholes remind me of Simeon Brown. Remember how Simeon Brown was going to fix all these? Well, there they are. So, yeah, it was crap, because teachers, basically, their scale goes from something like 71,000 up to 103,000, but here was the government claiming 147,000. I mean, 147,000 is way, way more than 103,000, which is where if you work for 10 years as a teacher, that's the cap. That's about as much as you can make. And so Jenny May pointed all this out to Luxon, and Luxon, brushed it all off. And he started using some deceptive language. So what am I talking about? Well, what I'm talking about is how, if you go back a few years, which is what he did, and you don't look at inflation and you don't add up inflation, but you just add up, what teachers might have actually been, able to get and other pay offers over the years, and you add them all up together and you get a bigger number. And so this is what Luxon did. He said, look, teachers, when you add it all up, maybe they're on 7% or maybe even 14% a pay increase, and now we're just adding a 1% increase to top that all up, while inflation is down at 2.7%. 2.7%. So he didn't talk about how inflation over the past 3 years that he was talking about probably all adds up to something like over 20%. But he wanted to hide that and fool us, and anyone that didn't really count inflation would probably see that teachers have been going backwards for quite some time. So that didn't wash, and it was just more of the same. There goes the car. I'm carrying an umbrella, so I'll just change my hands here. Get a bit tired carrying a selfie stick after a while. Anyway, as you can see, lots of potholes here, pothole brown. Anyway, so yeah, Christopher Luxon's lips were moving, so he was lying again, trying to deceive us all about how it was perfectly fair for teachers to keep getting real terms pay cuts, and if you step back and make up some numbers and leave out inflation, then we could all be fooled into not supporting teachers anymore, and kind of demonising unions for standing up for fairness and standing up for workers' rights. So this was just more shit, really, the kind of thing that really pisses the average decent Kiwi off when they keep hearing Christopher Luxon doing this. There was some more conversation there about what he thought about the way in which the news broke this morning that there are 5 unions, and together they are taking the government to court, to the High Court, and they're taking them there soon. I think it's the 29th of August. And basically this is about pay equity and how Project 10 was secretive, and there wasn't any fairness about the way in which this was done, and it was secretive, and it avoided due process, but most of all it breached the Bill of Rights that people have, because of their gender, to be paid a fair pay. And Christopher Luxon's spin was the usual spin that we normally hear, and it went along the lines of, well, the entire pay equity system somehow or another had got out of whack and it was unworkable, whatever that means. But it basically means that Nicola Willis had foolishly kind of gone down that neoliberal path by blaming Grant Robertson for spending too much. So she had to come up with some operational budgets for the whole country which were too low and involved a lot of cuts, and in this case theft of pay equity funds. So to conceal this theft they needed to come up with a cool story, and the cool story was basically that the system was unworkable to employers, but it preserved a kind of sex-based discrimination. And the spin goes that you can make a claim, you won't be eligible, but you can make the claim that there's a system that can't be worked, but it still exists. Look, you can make a claim and the system still exists. We still have pay equity. So this language was basically being used to conceal the injustice and the theft. So we all saw that happening again this morning, and it was all pretty disgraceful. And nobody was really convinced, and Luxon wasn't fooling anybody. What a shocker. Then there was, over on Radio New Zealand, there was a conversation between Luxon and Ingrid Hipkiss. And those guys, well, what did they talk about? Well, one of the topics that came up between these guys was Auckland is singing out for some help, and business leaders have actually sung out that they've lost faith in Christopher Luxon, this whole focus on the economy rhetoric. We're focusing on growing the economy. That doesn't help anyone in Auckland. Auckland has heard that now for far too long, and then far too long again. And so what did Christopher Luxon say? He said, oh, well, we're focused on growing the economy again, because he doesn't have any real answers. And then he started going on about how great investment boost was, because, you could write off some investments if you had the money and the capital and the attitude to kind of buy anything right now. Then maybe you could wipe off some of the previous sort of money that you'd have to pay. But it hasn't really actually helped Auckland. And Wayne Brown, he'd been saying, well, look, there's a simple solution and you guys will cave in on it. The government will cave in on a bed tax, which is basically adding about 2.5% to the cost of, when people come to Auckland and stay in a hotel, they pay a little 2.5% extra in tax. And because that's a workable solution that could raise money for Auckland, Christopher Luxon didn't like that idea at all, so he just ruled it out. And there wasn't really a good explanation when Ingrid Hipkiss asked him why. Why doesn't that work? Why is that the wrong idea? And so once again, you know, this was kind of like fundamentalist thinking, anti-Auckland thinking. And Wayne Brown said, hey, well, this is the third of New Zealand that Luxon is ignoring. And Luxon did actually say something about, hey, we're not going to do anything like that this term, which probably means maybe he'll adopt some of these ideas going into the 2026 election if he actually gets that far. Luxon was also asked by Ingrid Hipkiss whether he thinks he'll still be the leader of the National Party, you know, for much longer, even to the next election. And Christopher Luxon just laughed as if, you know, you couldn't be any more out of touch, like he was really popular or something, and there wasn't any problem about his leadership, and he would be leading the party no matter what going into the election. But this involved ignoring all the data and the evidence and the polls, and we've got, you know, a guy in real denial. There are some of us on the left that think it's a good job that Christopher Luxon isn't going to face reality about his loserdom and how much people resent his ongoing spin and lack of evidence and denials and basically wide boy, you know, fundamentalist salesmanship that doesn't wash. It's like this vacuum cleaner salesman trying to bust in your door and throw dirt on your carpet, isn't it? It's just unacceptable, and it's out of date, and nobody likes it. So maybe it's good to have that guy still there, because then National will definitely go down in that election big time. So yeah, those were some of the stories in the news this morning. There was, of course, many other stories that are hanging around. Like one of them that came up was that Davy Boy had been OIA'd, and we found out that Davy Boy Seymour was trying to get it some regulations around wearing a helmet when you're cycling on the road, when your children are cycling on the road, and it's, you know, there's trucks everywhere and bikes and mad people who are drunk driving around. Davy Boy didn't want your kids wearing helmets anymore. He wanted that to go. He didn't think there was any point in having helmets on cyclists anymore, and he was keen to cut red tape, and if your kid did land on their skull and break it open, well, Davy Boy wouldn't actually be taking any raps for that. He just knows that, you know, ideologically regulations are bad, and it's all about freedom to ride your bikes without any helmets. So he got called out for that, and he looked pretty stupid again, as per usual. There's a bit of wind I'm walking into now, so it's probably affecting the microphone. But Davy Boy was also pretty quick to go on the ad hominem attack against Grant Robertson, because we all felt pretty good about Grant coming on Q&A yesterday and quite easily debunking a lot of the rubbish from the Royal Commission of Inquiry and its show trial. The New Zealand Herald didn't really feature those stories because it's now got Jim Grennan on the board, and it's got Stephen Joyce as the chairman, and it's got one of the centrist mates, the directors from the centrists, sitting on the editorial board. So of course it's not going to mean balance when it says balance. Balance is something far out to the right on the political spectrum to these guys, right? So their idea of balance is to attack Labour and then be silent when Grant actually has something to say, and just don't publish those comments. But yeah, Grant, walking into that wind, Grant basically, you know, he did 4.5 hours of testimony. We all know the story there. The Royal Commission got all of the information it needed, and you know, it was just a show trial. And so Davy Boy, he took the idea that a show trial was communist, right? And so rather than arguing about whether Grant was right or wrong, he tried to attack Grant and say, well, Grant, you're the last person to be using communist practices as a defence. So Davy Boy was attacking the messenger, not the argument. And yeah, basically that's kind of Davy Boy for you, the weakest of arguments. But often for people who do support ACT, It's not about facts, and it's not about rational argument, and it's not about, a proper debate. It's often about this kind of insult slinging and prejudice and one-sidedness and tribalism. So this morning I actually encountered a few of these people. I wrote an article this morning kind of questioning whether it was time now for a general strike against all of the things that the government are doing to real people all up and down the country. The government likes to call it a two-speed recovery, where the vast majority of New Zealanders, possibly about 90% of us, are worried about money and worried about paying astronomical bills. People are losing their jobs. People are not able to pay, these huge fees and bills that are coming at us left, right and centre, and it's all just getting worse. We know that there's no good news, there's no growing of the economy, no matter how much Christopher Luxon says he's focused on it. That's all just spin, like a holding pattern. So basically, you've got that 90% who are really struggling and worrying. People are losing their incomes, not knowing how they're going to pay for things. And that's stress, that's not peaceful, good living anymore under a national government who are making things worse. Cutting things, slashing jobs, stalling construction, really making things a lot worse. And they'll talk about consents this afternoon and how magnificent they are, but it won't actually make a dent. It won't help people in Auckland who are suffering. The entire business community are calling out now. They're sick and tired of this. The business community have had it. The workers have had it. The nurses have had it. The doctors have had it. The surgeons have had it. The teachers have had it. Basically, the entire Te Ao Māori world, apart from a very small minority, have had it, And we're sort of looking at a general strike. We're talking about both a general strike and a hikoi, because this democracy in New Zealand is being dictated to by a very, very, very poor government that's abusing us, that's lying to us, that's fending us off with spin. You heard the whole thing about Tama Pōtaka saying, well, there's many reasons why homelessness is doubling just as soon as we increase all those rejection rates by 386%. And of course, the Salvation Army, or they're going to lie to you, not Tama Pōtaka, or Chris Bishop, the former tobacco lobbyist. So, we're being faced by a bunch of conmen here who are really trying to rip the guts out of, what it means to actually have a good life in New Zealand. You can't be peaceful when you're worried about your income. You can't be peaceful about how you're going to make ends meet when you're juggling bills. And this is what they're doing. They're driving us down. They're driving people out of New Zealand looking for a better life. Constantly getting stories about Christopher Luxon's poor leadership. He's in complete denial about it. And so the news is always pretty bad. So good luck to the unions. Let's hope that they can take the government, when they do take the government to court, that they win their case, and that the 180,000 people who had their pay equity stolen and the sex-based discrimination increased will get justice against these people like Davey Boy and Van Velden and Erica and Willis and co, who conspired because they thought that their crimes, and I'll call them crimes, were justified because they didn't want a two-speed system. So they have this weak two-speed system excuse. We didn't want two systems, so we justify a much greater crime because we don't want two systems. Okay, I'm starting to get rained on here, so I might just stop for a second. This is Blackpool. Behind me is a kind of a hotel. It looks pretty cool, doesn't it? Right down on the waterfront here. And just out here is a bit of a reef, you can sort of see there. So it's just lightly raining. We've walked around the Esplanade, which is that point behind me. If you look there, we've just walked around there. Now I'll just put up this umbrella. Could be a little bit of a disturbance. Wait a second. Up. There we go. See, you can't stop G News from walking around. So yeah. So it's been just one thing after another for all of this term of government. It's just been one shocking thing. And people are saying, well, look, what can happen today? Because usually there's about 2 or 3 things every day that either destroys our environment, wrecks something precious that we value, takes away protections and safety that New Zealanders need in our regulations, threatens our future, destroys our incomes, weakens our security, takes away our rights, you know, the workers being able to stand up for themselves. And you do get this two-track economy. You get the farmers having a bit of a short-term run, you know, so they're happy for a short while until it goes wrong again for them. Maybe a drought or a flood, or, you know, the world prices for milk will crash again soon, and all of it will come tumbling down. So the two-speed economy is about extremely wealthy people who own a lot of assets, and those assets not being taxed fairly. Like Grant said, we do have that situation in New Zealand where the party of the wealthy, the National Party, is preserving the unfairness of an asset class that's not taxed fairly. And New Zealand is being hoodwinked. Basically, the wealthy are relying on us actually not to pay attention, to actually be too busy at our jobs, to be worrying about our incomes, to be watching Netflix or tuning out of politics. And while all of this is happening, we've got this open-air prison with millions of people being starved to death in the world, while the cameras are all pointing at what Trump's going to say to Zelensky tomorrow, after failing to get anywhere with Putin. So, you know, there are people out there that will keep voting for Trump as if he's going to solve all their problems, when here's just a big game playing out, and no cameras are focused on children starving in Gaza. No new TVNZ reports last night about it. No, nothing. We've just clammed up and stopped talking about it, even though there were nationwide protests. All we could talk about is Jerry and his battle with Chloe, rather than the actual story. Now, that's not what Chloe wanted, but that's what our media do, because the media control the spotlight. And they're very good at blaming politicians for directing the spotlight that they control. So I'll just have a quick look here behind me. You can see that there's a flagpole here. This flagpole is outside the house of Sir Peter Leach. And when the Warriors win a game, the Warriors flag flies on that flagpole. And Sir Peter Leach, he raises that flag every time the Warriors won. So it's not flying right now. I guess that might mean that we haven't won a game. But yeah, so good old Peter, he lives down this way. And he's got some sort of giant chair in the background there. Anyway, I'll just take you down here to Blackpool, and we'll sign off here in a minute. But before I do, I just want to show you a couple of things. So this is Blackpool, and out there are some birds on the mud. See them behind me there. So a little bit further down are all the godwits that fly up and down the world. They go to China and Alaska and they come back again, and they do that. There's about 50 of them here. And right down the end of the beach, like way in the distance there, is the Piritahi marae. The Piritahi marae basically means all together as one and everyone is welcome. You just go there and you get welcomed onto the marae. Now in the weekend there's going to be a bit of a debate between Pini Hanare and Te Pāti Māori about the upcoming elections in Tamaki Makaurau, and I'll probably be down there, and hopefully I'll get an interview with those guys, you know, about why you should vote for them and what are the issues facing Māori at the moment. And we know that this government's a common issue for both candidates that are standing. But that's basically all I had to say today. And now I'm going to walk all the way back around the Esplanade in the rain. And but I'm going to wish you all a happy Monday, and we'll see you all around about 4 o'clock, because that's when there's a post-cabinet presser, and Christopher Luxon will appear with his Minister Pink, who will be boasting about how they've made a big change to building regulations, and they've made it quicker to get consents and fewer middlemen and all this kind of thing if you want to build a house, while at the same time, you know, they've stalled construction, they haven't built as many houses as they should have, and this is all just sticking plaster type changes to try and look good. But in reality, they haven't made anything better and they haven't delivered on any of their promises. That's all from me. Have a wonderful day. Talk to you again soon.
Welcome to G News, the good news.